So it must have been a lot of work for just the two of you to make a game like that. How did you decide who did what?
I mean, yeah, the Division Delay was very similar to all the earlier games we made. I focused on programming the engine. I was mostly interested in could I make it so that one player walking around on one computer would show up on the screen of another computer. If one person spoke, would the other person hear them speak, trying to get everything synchronizing over the network, trying to get it running over extremely low bandwidth connections, because back in those days everyone was on dial-up. Trying to get it running on incredibly low spec server hardware, because the plan originally was I'd run it on an old 486 a friend of mine had that he didn't want anymore. So a lot of work sort of trying to, which actually sounds crazy, but actually turned out to be a really good approach, because it meant when the game unexpectedly suddenly started having thousands of players, it still worked.
So I remember you telling me that the whole family kind of got involved with it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I sort of pressed ganged anyone I possibly could into helping me make my games in general. So, you know, I persuaded Paul to do graphics, Ian to do graphics, Paul to do levels. My mum did some of the graphics in RuneScape Classic. She did the camel and the bat, the bear. So, yeah, pretty much got everybody helping out. All my friends testing it.
And how about your early sound effects? How did you create those?
Oh yeah, they were made with a microphone in my mum's kitchen. So the cooking sound in RuneScape Classic I made by recording my mum frying some bacon. It was all very high budget stuff.
Awesome.
The fishing noise. Filled the sink with water, and Andrew dropped something in and it made a nice splash noise, and it also drenched the kitchen. So, yeah, the fucking made up a big mess.
So here we go, some early RuneScape Classic images.
This is the concept. Yeah, we actually had concept art.
National Demon, Goblin,
These were like properly drawn, and then they ended up scanned down, and then
yeah, the game RuneScape Classic art was actually hand drawn and then scanned and then shrunk, which didn't actually work very well. Because part of this is something it didn't look very good.
Awesome. So, what kind of issues did you run into in the early days? I remember you telling me that it was all very carefully planned originally, and then you just got to a point where you just wanted to chuck stuff out there.
It got to the point where we've been working on the game for about, well over a year, and we were getting pretty bored of writing it. And this was by far the longest I've spent writing any game. I was beginning to think I'm never going to launch this game. So we started getting more and more just like, look, let's just finish the flipping game so we can write the next one. So this is my diary that I made just coming up to the launch of RuneScape Classic. I'm quite pleased I had to write down at the time what I was doing.
So you can see that they've actually worked on Christmas Day there as well, and on Boxing Day. And it sort of accelerates as you get up to launch, and we just started going more and more bonkers as we just sort of like realising there's actually not enough game. Until you get up to sort of just in January, there's crazy things like, where was it? 2nd of January, new skill mining, 2nd of January, new skill smithing. 2 skills in one day. Just to give you some idea, the next talk after this is about dungeoneering, which we worked on for 18 months. Bothered face? Anyway, we were working on dungeoneering for 18 months, and Andrew managed to produce mining and smithing in a day.
Yeah.
And obviously we went through about 6 months of testing. How much testing did you go through?
A day of testing, because we launched on the 4th of January. I think the testing on the 3rd of January with a few friends of mine, the only feedback I got was that it seemed a bit too easy to level smithing, and perhaps I shouldn't put the anvils and the furnaces in the same place. So in fact, one of my testing friends for the fact that they're not actually in the same location as each other, because I got changed on the 3rd of January.
Cool. So, Paul, actually, let's skip those questions there. No, we'll stick to that. What kind of issues were you running into in the early days? Because obviously you were responsible for the storyline. So. Yes,
I mean in the early days again I was just frantically trying to get as much content out as possible. It'd be nice to properly flesh out a lot of the storyline for the worlds, but mostly I was doing a lot of mapping of areas and making quests so that there was enough stuff for people to explore early on. Some of the bits of storylines which you've got in RuneScape today, which are now fundamental parts, were just sort of throwaway comments almost in quests. When I was writing the Restless Ghost quest, I wanted to have a little bit of chat with the priest in the church in Lumbridge, and
thought, well, he's a priest, we'll ask him about the religion of the world. So at that point I had to think of who the gods of the world would be. So then I thought, okay, well, I'll have 3 gods made the world. And I just sort of, not really any sort of plan to a lot about them. I just thought, yes, I quite like the concepts of different alignments. So I just sort of chucked that in. And now it's all later on, a nice little threads for me to expand out later on when I had a bit more time.
But it's interesting how it sort of works the opposite way as you would expect. Rather than thinking we're going to have this mythos of the gods that we need a church, we put a church in because it seemed like a nice medieval thing. And then we had to work out what went with it.
Cool. So, Andrew, around 2001, you launched the members version of the game. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that was probably RuneScape's darkest day. Just before that, up until that point, I've been writing RuneScape mainly as a hobby, with a plan that I would sort of fund it and pay my rent by internet banner advertising. The problem was, in 2001, the .com bubble pretty much started to collapse, and the advertising dried up, and it got harder and harder and harder to find people who wanted to buy banner advertising. And it was a really vicious circle, because all the people advertising on the internet were other .coms, and as one went down, they stopped advertising, and it took another one down, and you had a whole sort of chain reaction. And it got down to the point where I only had one advertiser left, who was paying pretty much breaking even on the server hosting costs. And then they pulled the plug, and I suddenly found myself in a situation where I had fairly hefty outgoings. I had no staff, but I was still having to pay for my bandwidth and my rent and food. And knowing at all, and I was like, nuts. I'm going to have to shut the game down, can't afford the bandwidth, I'm going to have to get a real job, or drag. But I thought it was one last ditch effort. I'd ask people if they'd give donations so I could keep the game open. But then, and discussing it with Paul and a few other people, we thought that if we gave something in return, we'd be more likely to give donations. And we were worried that if we just did ordinary donations, everyone would donate once for the first month, and then we'd be closing it down months later anyway. So we came up with this idea of members. We weren't at all sure if it would work, because at this point, pretty much everything on the internet was free. The idea of paying for things on the internet was like, what?
Wow.
We sort of did a back of the envelope calculation. We worked out we need something like 3,000 members to be able to break even, to basically pay for our server and pay our rent.
How many players do you think you had about that?
I don't know how many free players we had around that. What I do know is back then we had 4.5 servers. Well, there was one which we could only fit 500 players on, and they got full capacity every evening.
You couldn't log in.
You couldn't log in, but we couldn't afford any more servers.
We had massive problems with our early servers. They crashed if we put too many people on them.
So an early member's benefit was actually get to log in at any time.
Yes. You get your own server. But it turned out ages later, the reason the servers crashed every time they were full was because the company that I purchased them off put the heat sinks on the CPUs back to front. I didn't find that out until about 3 years later. Spent absolute months trying to work out why they were crashing.
We couldn't see them because they were over.
Then we couldn't see them. They were in the US. We couldn't open them up. Ages later, we opened them up to replace a hard disk, and someone said, "You know, there's melted plastic all over the motherboard." And it turned out not only did we put the heatsink on our back front, we'd not taken the plastic cover that comes off it. Quite amazing, managed to get it on, but that was why RuneScape was so unstable back then.
Crazy. So, and how long did it take you to get those 3,000 players that you needed?
So we were amazed. We were sort of like, it's never going to work. And then with the first week, we had 5,000 members. And we were like, oh, we're saved. We don't have to shut the game down. And then we suddenly realised, we've got 5,000 paid customers. We should perhaps answer their emails. We can't. But it meant so then we spent that money on our first members of staff.
Let's have a quick chat about the first members content that we put into the game. So, Paul, tell us about that content.
Okay, there wasn't a huge amount of content in the game for members, which was partially why we were very worried that a lot of people would play. There was, so here, one new skill, Herblore, spelt wrongly in those days. We eventually figured out that Herblore is spelled L-O-R-E for knowledge of something. There was 6 quests, dueling, there were a few new areas. There's Brimhaven, Zenaris, White Wolf Mountain, and the Camelot King Arthur area. We've got the picture. Oh, and shark fishing as well. Here's some new shark edition. We've got shark fishing, so check out the shark. There they are. And we've also got some RuneScape classic dueling. So back at this time, you could duel pretty much anywhere in the game, if you remember.
There wasn't a dueling arena specifically, and usually you just get a lot of players hang outside the front of Lumbridge. A lot of bones always lying around. I decided not to speed this one up, so you can fully appreciate the joy of RuneScape Classic combat.
It was quite interactive.
What a four! Wow. We need some like drum rolls. We need some like drum rolls for the finish. Actually, yeah, give me a hand with the drum rolls. Get it close, get it close. Oh, it's a 10! Oh, no! Dueling win! Oh, no, dear. Incidentally, that was me on the right there. I'm not quite sure what happened. Yeah, it all went downhill from here, really.
Well, many people playing.
I quickly checked my stats there to make sure I was actually maxed. And here we go, the final blow. And there it is. Oh, no, not quite. Almost.
Oh, you've been black.
And here's a shot of King Arthur, who was a very popular character because he had a yellow party, a crown.
Yes. Again, King Arthur was pushing the game because at that point we still didn't have a huge amount of plans to where the storyline was going. So a lot of it was sort of from the mods. Some of the mods I played, they did just took random content and again and took little bits from literature and stuff. One of the early mods I played, there was a whole area which was dedicated to stuff to do with Alice in Wonderland and stuff, so it seemed perfectly normal for me to bung in things like King Arthur and Romeo and Juliet at that stage, before there was any sort of overarching storyline which said, why on earth is he here? So,
cool. So, Andrew, you began talking earlier a little bit about the fact that you realised that suddenly people were paying you money and you probably needed to start answering emails. So
once we got over the joy of the fact that we weren't going to shut the game down, probably about a day later, sort of reality sort of set in, and some dawning realisation that we were actually running a proper business and we were going to need staff. I've never actually employed anyone in my life, never been to a job interview in my life, but I set up in Cambridge. At this point I was living in Nottingham with my parents in an attempt to save costs. So I moved back to Cambridge, sorted myself out a house to rent over the weekend, just sort of basically chose the first one I saw. Went to a local sort of office incubator place, which was run by the university, and said, need an office, don't know how it works, when can I have an office? And they said, you can have one tomorrow if you like. And I was like, oh, great. So I got my office in a day, moved in, put an advert in the Cambridge Evening News for wanted customer support staff. I think we had quite a lot of applicants actually, probably about 20 applicants. We did it on the site as well. We put it on the site as well. Had lots of players applying, but most of them were sort of 12 and living in, America, so probably wasn't really going to work. Did the interviews with the people who could actually get to the office. Don't know what they thought, because at this point it was a room which was probably about 2 meters by 3 meters with no furniture at all. Similar to the size of the stage, would it be? And it was basically me with a table that I'd borrowed off someone and a laptop and a list of interview questions I'd printed off the internet the night before.